Hey everyone! Today I'm reviewing The Liar Princess and the Blind Prince, a cute 2D puzzle platformer by NIS, who sent me a code to check out the Switch version. The game came out in Japan last year on the PS4, Vita, and Switch, and now we're getting the PS4 and Switch versions. This game has a pretty interesting backstory. Apparently NIS holds a contest every year where their employees pitch ideas for games. This is where games like Firefly Diary and Yomawari came from. Which finally explains something I've wondered about, which is why NIS, a company that usually focuses on just a couple specific genres, ended up creating these smaller indie-like experiences. Anyways, this game was pitched one year by Sayaka Oda, a web designer working for the company who ended up doing most of the art direction, characters, and animation on the game. Her idea to create a game that was inspired by dark fairy tale storybooks was clearly a labor of love, and it shows. The amount of care put into how the characters look and move is amazing, and overall the visual style just really makes the game stand out. I'd love to show off some of the more incredible moments in the game, but I won't since I think that would ruin some of the surprises that the game has to offer. The game's story is really representative of old, darker fairy tales, not the cute Disney-fied versions, but the ones with pretty horrifying elements and serious consequences. It takes place in a kingdom surrounded by a dangerous forest that's inhabited by monsters and a wish-granting witch. Here lives a wolf that sings under the moon each night with an incredible singing voice. The young prince from the kingdom goes out into the woods to listen to her singing, not knowing that she's a man-eating wolf, and he ends up losing his eyes in an accident. I guess the king and queen are ashamed of him now because they lock him up in the prison. Feeling responsible and sad, the wolf decides to see the forest witch to help the prince. The witch grants the wolf's wish, giving her the power to turn into a princess at will so she can guide the blind prince through the forest without him discovering that she's actually a monster. They can still talk to each other. All the monsters in this game speak the same language as the humans, so he doesn't know if he can't see her. As the wolf, she breaks the prince out of the prison, and then as the human, she convinces him that she's a princess from a neighboring kingdom who's come to help him. Together, they make their way through the deadly forest, trying to get to the witch's house, while she tries to keep her true nature secret from the prince. The story has a long opening to set things up and some good character building moments throughout it. It builds to a pretty cool finale, and overall it's well told, interesting, and not as predictable as it might seem at first glance. One thing I usually wouldn't complain about is the lack of an English voiceover. I know that smaller niche Japanese games feature Japanese voices only, and that's the preferred way to play them for most gamers, myself included, but there's not really dialogue in this game. All the scenes are being narrated like a storybook is being read to you. And in that case, I think an English track actually makes a lot of sense and would have been a nice option. Getting into the gameplay, like I said, the game is a puzzle platformer. I'm not sure if that's the official genre name, but that's the one I've always used. For games that look like 2D platformers, but the focus is on solving puzzles with platformer mechanics to get through a contiguous environment. The original defining game in the genre was Out of This World or Another World, but a more recent example is something like Limbo. Throughout the game, you control the lying wolf princess. Anytime you're not in the air, you can press a button to transform between the wolf and princess forms. Using these forms, you have to guide the prince through each of the levels to help him get past various obstacles as well as monsters who will attack on sight. If the prince or princess dies, either from falling too far or into a pit or by getting attacked by a monster, you have to start from the last checkpoint. The checkpoints are pretty generous and basically after every challenge in a level, so you don't have to redo much. While it is pretty rare, you can get separated from the prince in a way that you can't get back to him. This only happened to me once, and if it does happen, you can just kill yourself to reload the last checkpoint. There's a restart stage option, but that'll take you all the way back to the beginning of the stage, so just dying is a better choice. In princess form, you're pretty fragile and not as agile, but you can hold the prince's hand to guide him through the stage. You can also interact with some objects like levers, and you're small enough to fit through gaps that you can't get through as the wolf. While in wolf form, you're nearly invincible. You can't be killed by monsters, you move faster and jump higher, and you can attack enemies to take them out. To get through the stages, you have to clear the path with the wolf and then guide the prince through the obstacles. There's definitely some twitch moments throughout the game where you need to swap at a moment's notice to deal with things that pop out of nowhere, but they're few and far between. It is mostly puzzle solving and less action. When you're holding the prince's hand in princess form, you can also direct him to move left, right, or pick up an object he's standing over. Those are mainly heavy blocks and lanterns you can use to solve puzzles. Eventually, you'll get the ability to issue these commands when you're not holding hands, so then even as the wolf you can direct him. Like most puzzle platformers, it's a simple control scheme that just works well. Issuing commands to the prince takes a couple tries to get used to since you have to press on the D-pad to bring up the command and then select it, which seems like an unnecessary step. You also can't control exactly how far he moves, so you gotta plan his movements accordingly. There's 22 stages in the game, split up into several areas of the forest. Each area is distinctly visual, but they all feel like they belong in the forest. Each area adds about 2 different minor variations to the gameplay to keep it feeling fresh and not repetitive as you go through it. There are around 10 creatures in the game that behave completely differently. Some of them are just there to kill you, others can be used to help you get past obstacles or reach collectibles, but can also hurt you if you approach them wrong. They're placed sparingly, so even though there's only a handful, they're used in unique ways to make new challenges. Other than the first and last one, each stage has 5 optional flower petals to collect, and thankfully they aren't as hard to find as you'd expect from most games. They're pretty much in plain sight, so as long as you explore the stages a bit more than necessary, you're likely to grab most of them on your first run through. The tougher ones just require thinking out different ways to approach them. And there's some you can just suicide to get, because when you die you keep the collectibles you've gotten. There's also an optional flower collectible in certain stages that you can only pick up and carry in princess form, and then you have to get it back to the prince to hand it over. These aren't too hard to get either, but it can be fun to try and figure out the ways you have to get back to the prince safely while in princess form. Some of the stages have number riddles, which feel a bit out of place. There's only like 5 of them throughout the game, and most of them are pretty easy. One is more involved, but the game knows it's an extra challenge, and you can just avoid it with a shortcut. You just miss out on collectibles that you can come back for later. One feature that you don't expect to see in this kind of game is a skip stage option. It's a neat feature for people who are stuck and just want to see the story move forward. You have to at least try the stage though, since the game won't let you skip it till you've spent about 10 minutes on that stage. The game also features a stage select, which can be used at any time to go back to previous stages you've already been to in order to pick up the extra collectibles you might have missed. This is a pretty enticing feature for the genre, as usually when I'm done with a game in this genre, I generally don't want to go back and play through the whole thing from the beginning right away, so just being able to go back to the stages I need to go to just makes things a little easier. And when I finished this one, I basically did that, just jump around and try and find the rest of the items. The cutscenes aren't skippable, however, which is a bit annoying when you're doing the cleanup. You can advance through the text faster, but some are still pretty long, so it'd be nice to have a real skip option for those once you've seen them once, especially since you can watch them at any time through the memories menu. Speaking of collectibles, there's various options in the game that fill out as you play through it. The stage select screen shows you all the collectibles you've found and what stages still have collectibles to find, so you'll know where to go back to. The album page is where you can rewatch the cutscenes I mentioned before, but it also contains 10 witch stories that unlock when you give the prince one of the flower collectibles in the game. These little snippets tell a bit of the story of the witch's past, so there's some nice extra content there. The collection page is a list of concept art that unlocks as you find flower petals. The art here is a really nice addition to the game. It includes design notes and is actually worth checking out compared to the gallery sections in most games in my opinion. The trophies page includes the badges that appear when you complete objectives. I imagine they're tied to PS4 trophies. There's the typical stuff you would expect, but there's also 6 stage challenges here to go back and get. They're really just either completing a stage in a certain amount of time or getting through a stage without killing any enemies. So that's the Liar Princess and the Blind Prince, a super charming puzzle platformer that's a welcome addition to the genre. As a kid I loved games like Out of This World and Flashback, but I don't really get into them as much anymore, and even critically acclaimed games like Limbo and Inside didn't hook me, so I was pleasantly surprised with how much I ended up enjoying this one. Like most games in the genre, the unique art is a big draw to the game, and wanting to see how the story developed was a lot more exciting than the traditional bare-bones story these games typically have. All in all, the first playthrough takes between 4 and 5 hours, and it might take another hour or 2 to clean up things after that, which, I know some people will consider short, but for this genre, it is kind of the perfect length. If you've never been able to get into similar games, and the art style and story don't appeal to you, then this really isn't going to change your mind on the genre. But if it is a genre that you're into, it's well worth checking out. Though it may be a bit too easy for experienced players, if you haven't really played one of these before, it's the perfect entry point. The art and story are great, the stage select and skip stage make it accessible to anyone, and the stage design is overall a good balance between being too easy and too frustrating. The Liar Princess and the Blind Prince releases digitally and physically on February 12th. There's also a wolf plush and acrylic stand that are both pretty nice looking too. As a last note, I really hope Sayaka Oda designs more games because I'd love to see more in her style. Thanks for checking out this review. Let me know what you think of this game in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!